So I will be talking about how to start scaling up embodied carbon reporting from a developer's perspective. This is based on our work with Trammell Crow company. Trammell Crow is a subsidiary of CBRE, and they are one of the largest real estate developers in this country. They both have committed to achieving net zero carbon emissions by 2040, and Trammell Crow wanted to start by committing to report embodied carbon for all their projects from 2025, so practically from now. So as you know, CBRE has projects and assets all across the world, but primarily focused in North America and Europe, whereas Trammell Crow is primarily in the United States. But when it comes to embodied carbon accounting and frameworks, since CBRE has alignment both in North America and Europe, we are also trying to have the same alignments for Trammell Crow. So hence, Echo, Lead, BREEAM, RICS, all of them will be relevant in what we consider as our boundaries. TCC, Trammell Crow wants to do this as a top-down approach for efficiency and consistency and a scalable embodied carbon reporting process. It is spearheaded by James and Marnie, who are also on the call today, the Trammell Crow sustainability team. They will be establishing the goals, boundaries, processes, and with our support, templatizing all the resources needed for this program, and then passing them on to the development managers who will be responsible for team selections and coordinating tasks across each project. And then finally, like those are passed down to the design and construction teams and the LCA consultant. So what you see below are the areas where we helped Trammell Crow create resources and guidelines across their program, Embodied Carbon program, starting with the drivers, goals and boundaries, establishing process and responsibilities, templatizing a workshop, specs, bid docs, contracts, LCA data collection process, and embodied carbon reporting, all of them standardized to make it repeatable, comparable across all their projects. So the embodied carbon roadmap has two primary drivers. One is the actual commitment to net zero, but also like a big driver is how these projects are funded. Trammell Crow is a minority, and the investors have majority of the fund, and hence return of investment and investors' interests are key, and hence cost and schedule implications play a major role in deciding what can be committed to from the get-go. So we wanted to start with disclosure first and zero to minimum cost and schedule interventions first. Hence, all projects will go through a mandatory reporting and assessment of low cost decarbonization efforts. Some projects will have like innovative design and materials being considered, but the future goal, like ultimately in a few years, we want to make sure that embodied carbon cap can be established for all projects, both for materials and building level targets. So Trammell Crow has three main types of project building use: office, multifamily, and industrial. So establishing the scope boundaries was was very much relevant to what CBRE is doing, because as a parent company, they have established those boundaries, but also keeping in mind that it will be relevant in the United States. So we had two different frameworks primarily driving what we considered was within scope. So LEAD as well as BREEAM were relevant, and we made sure that whatever is the most comprehensive was included in our scope. For example, site work, it's not yet required in LEAD, but it is required in BREEAM, and we know ECHO is going to require it, and LEAD v5 has introduced it, so we have mandated it as well. And same goes for life cycle stages too. whatever was the most comprehensive was captured for TCC's reporting. This, I think, is critical in embodied carbon workshopping, making sure that the process timeline and responsibilities are clearly identified for each design and construction milestone as it relates to embodied carbon milestones. So each embodied carbon milestone was separated out into specific tasks, and each of those tasks were assigned to one of the stakeholders, all the way from the sustainability team to general contractors. And this RACI matrix essentially identifies like who is directly responsible versus accountable or informed for each task, and where to find the resources for each of these responsibilities. And these resources primarily lie in the workshop deck, specs and contracts, LCA report template, and a bill of materials. Originally, the plan was to apply this to all our projects and mandate it. And then, like I said, cost and schedule implications have a major role. And what we realized was there were quite a bit of projects that may go through schematic design, DDs and CDs, or schematic design and DDs, but may not end up being constructed. So we realized that we have to make this optional and evaluate the design phase baseline and optimized LCA on a case-by-case basis, because this turned out to be the biggest, most time-consuming and costly process. So in terms of documents that we created, I feel like specifications right now have become pretty standard for performance-based requirements of concrete, steel, etc. But we thought that it was important to include some of the responsibilities very clearly in the specs as well. So making sure deliverables, due dates, responsible parties are clearly in the administrative requirements, not just for the GC, but also for architects and structural engineers. And then corresponding language being in the RFP for the team as well, so that it's clear, the expectations are clear from in the contract. And then on the right side, we have the concrete pour requirements. This was vetted by NRMCA and Don Davies. And the goal here was to make sure that if there's, since we are mandating some sort of assessment for concrete optimization, allowing for pilot concrete mixes, and if you're allowing pilot concrete mixes, making sure that the test requirements are clearly outlined, and also clarifying what is recommended versus what is mandatory in terms of pilot concrete pours. And this brings to my last slide, which is also the most important piece of this puzzle. It's the LCA data collection process and generating the LCA. So basically what we have decided is to create 3 separate bill of materials for each building use type. So one for residential, industrial, commercial, and making sure that all of them are pre-populated with the laundry list of all the building material categories that there can be for each building type. And those look significantly different. So we've had to make sure those were 3 different BOMs, bill of materials. And this lives in Excel. The goal is to make sure that this is circulated among the design and construction team, primarily the GCs who will be collecting quantities at final design, like from the pricing estimate, as well as for the as-built quantities. There are 2 main things that we are trying to address here. One is with the GC collecting these quantities, we are getting the quantities that were purchased for the project and not just we are seeing in the design. So any of the material waste is captured here because essentially that is the building's carbon footprint. If we can get any information on materials being diverted, that would be great. But as of now, only whatever is being purchased. Secondly, this living in Excel in a consistent format was to make sure that there are some back-end calculations going on, ensuring that acceptable materials, acceptable units of measure as it uh, pertains to like how this is being mapped in an LCA tool are built into this system so that suppose your a GC is populating reinforcing steel, they cannot just enter area or number of units, but it has to be in volume, for example. Um, and then making sure once we get all this data, since it is in Excel, uh, it is automatically, it can be automatically converted into a baseline LCA calculator either within Excel, or if we are doing project by project like LCAs based on product specific uh, EPDs, this can be directly extracted into an LCA tool. Right now we are using one-click LCA, but it could be any other tool. And then finally, this is being rolled out, but we have used this method in the past, and we have noticed like significant cost and time savings when using a repeatable format. And if it is, like I also have a percentage. So if the building use type and the material palette is almost similar, then the cost savings of doing an LCA can go up to 60% from what it would have taken if you did it from scratch every single time. So my goal is to make sure that this is a scalable, repeatable, and comparable process so that we have consistent data for Trammell Crow.